Hey, welcome everybody. It is a time for Talk Back. They told me not to sing. It's not a good idea. We want to keep the listeners here.
In fact, they're taking Peter off the air tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because of the singing.
Actually, I have so much vacation time built up. I have like 22 years of vacation time built up, okay? And so they told me I got to take every Friday off. Oh, darn. It's just going to be such a burden to do that. So anyway, so I'll be gone tomorrow. But I'm glad I'm here today because we have the Attorney General of the state of Montana, the Honorable Tim Fox, joining us on the phone. Tim, good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. The other good reason not to sing is you don't want to lose your guest caller-ins,
Oh, yeah. That was a threat.
It is particularly grating on the phone. I understand that. So. Anyway, well, I understand John was just mentioning that you had the opportunity to attend the inauguration last week.
I did. I'd been to one other inauguration a number of years ago for the re-election of George W. Bush, and it was freezing cold. Stood out there, but it was really moving to see the peaceful transfer of power and to know and understand that our government has been in existence for so long, and despite our differences, we tend to move on and move forward. That was pretty good, and I saw literally hundreds of Montanans there, which was a lot of fun. Everyone was having a great time.
Well, on another part of the world, the Montana legislature is emphasizing the differences. We did so earlier this week with the State of the State speech and the response, and I understand there is a Senate bill that has some concern from your department running through the legislature right now, dealing with sexual assault law.
Yeah, actually, that's a bill that we helped write through the interim committee process. There was a study on sexual assault and our response to sexual assault, and as you recall, that's been a real focus of mine in my first 4 years as Attorney General. We've done that in a lot of different ways, and training prosecutors, working with county attorneys, as we did there in Missoula County, to address those issues, and then most importantly, to work on addressing the rights of victims. So, but what we know and understand is that our laws are kind of antiquated as it stands now. You practically have to prove that you've been forcibly sexually assaulted, held down, maybe hit, beaten, restrained, etc. In a lot of cases. And what we know about the science of people and how they react in certain circumstances is that you're not always visibly forced into something like that. So we're updating our laws with regard to the definition of consent, and that just passed out of the Senate committee and the full Senate unanimously. So we're on to the House, and we're hopeful that the House will also pass it and that the governor will sign it into law.
Now, do you have any worries that the House may find any problem with this bill?
Well, certainly the legislative process is such that we want to openly talk about these issues and listen and learn, and the legislators in the House, I'm sure, will do that in the committee that will first hear this bill. But whether or not there will be any amendments, we'll have to wait and see. I think there will be substantial support for the bill. It's Senate Bill 29, by the way. And I would encourage your listeners to go online to the Montana Legislature's website and take a look at the bill. And if they feel they have any concerns, they get to be a part of the process, too. They can testify in committee as a for or against the bill, or just in an informational sense. So, been tremendous support so far, and we'll see what the House does with it.
So, what is the new or the desired definition of consent, and how complex is it? Do my wife and I need to keep legal paperwork in the bedroom, or what?
Yeah, I don't think you need to keep legal paperwork in the bedroom, but I can read it to you, actually, I guess is one way to do it, but it changes it from, as I mentioned, having to prove force to a definition that says consent means words or overt actions indicating a freely given agreement to have sexual intercourse or sexual contact. And then it goes on to further say that certain types of things that were used in the past to undermine the victim, such as what they were wearing or whether or not they'd had a previous relationship with someone, etc., are not necessarily evidence of consent. So, in other words, if you're wearing a revealing clothes, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking for something.
Does that now under current law?
Well, what we
Just
find
not mentioned.
what we find in the trials is that the victims end up getting basically beat up on a witness stand, and it's an unfortunate situation, and it actually prohibits a lot of people from coming forward because they're afraid that they will be once again victimized by the justice system, and that the tables will turn on them, and that all of a sudden they're the bad person.
I remember, Tim, when you were here in Missoula for the victims, when the victims came together to talk with you.
Right.
And I almost unanimously, the ones who did not report were afraid of exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And it's not just, how they'll be treated at trial by defense attorneys, but whether or not their concerns and their medical needs, for instance, will be provided for, whether they'll be re-traumatized over and over again by multiple investigators talking to them, defense attorneys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I can't relate to, a victim of violent crimes, how they respond. I can only listen and learn from their stories and from the science that has come from years and years of experience in this area. And so there just needs to be a sea change, if you will, in not only our laws and how we handle this, but in the public's perception about the whole issue.
Okay, we're up against a break, Tim, so hang in there. By the way, we have 3 lines open. If you'd like to visit with our Attorney General, give us a call at 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. If you're busy and you can't do that, we have our Facebook page. We'll be happy to pass along any messages or questions to Attorney General Tim Fox. We'll be right back. Talkback rolling right along. Joining us on the phone, the Attorney General of the state of Montana, Tim Fox, and we do have a caller. So let's get that on right now. I believe it is Steve. Steve, you're on with Attorney General Fox. Go ahead.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. The question I guess I have is, are men going to still be considered innocent until proven guilty, or do they have to prove their innocence now under whatever laws you're changing?
So, good question. No, the burden of proof is still on the state. And essentially, they won't be barred. The defendants aren't going to be barred from producing any evidence they want. It's just that in this day and age, you shouldn't have to prove the state shouldn't have to prove that that there was force in order to obtain a conviction. So. I would say, though, that, and by the way, it's not just men who are accused of sexual assault. Women are as well. But I would say that, we as a society need to rethink, our conduct, first of all, and our reaction to these issues. And that's where the science has led us through here because of things like trauma, for instance, and when there is a disparity between the size and the ability to either physically or emotionally coerce someone. We're also, I should have mentioned this earlier, we're adding some language to the statutes that talks about people who are incapable of consent. That could be anyone from someone who's developmentally disabled obviously a minor, to someone who's intoxicated or otherwise unable to consent. So there isn't necessarily force involved in a sexual assault there, because you've got a compliant victim, because they are incapacitated. But I think that's an important update to the statutes on sexual intercourse without consent, to add that additional feature that it is a crime to have sexual intercourse with someone who's incapable of consent.
Now, Tim, Steve brings up an interesting point. Have the trial lawyers had any problems with this bill? Have they lobbied against it?
No, and I haven't didn't go to the hearings. Of course, it's not necessarily trial lawyers; it's the defenders, the
Right.
public defenders, and the criminal defense attorneys who
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. So I'm not aware of. They were involved, I believe, in the process through the interim committee, but I'm not aware of any substantial objection to these changes that has come up either in the interim committee or in the legislature so far.
So when we're talking about intoxication or drug use being used, I mean, at what level? I mean, is there a BAC, a blood alcohol content, where you draw the line, or
each case would have to stand or fall on its own evidence. So they look at the totality of the circumstances. Certainly, BAC levels may be important. Obviously, it's important that the evidence be timely, so that's why we encourage victims to go to their local hospital clinics and have a sexual assault evidence kit or rape kit taken. So none of that will change. There will still be the ability to certainly defend an accusation. There will be a burden of proof on the state, first to prove the case, and then secondly, allowing the defendant to rebut the evidence and suggest otherwise. So none of that changes.
We have a question from one of our Facebook listeners. Gloria asks, can you explain the impact of President Trump's order pertaining to refugees flowing into Montana? I looked for this executive order yesterday, and even though people said it was coming, I don't think it's actually been published yet.
I haven't seen it. All I've seen is or heard is what I've seen on the news, and my recollection is that President Trump's intent was to stop the current program of bringing in refugees, but I really can't speak to it because I haven't read it at this point.
Gotcha. So moving on to some other stuff, I know that you were hotly addressing the budget bill and its impact on public safety. Is that still a major concern? Have things changed after the State of the State addresses?
So, well, it didn't come up in the State of the State address. The governor didn't address public safety or the cuts to law enforcement that he's proposing.
The response did. I believe Mr.
Mr. Knudsen said that.
Yeah, right. So I know that the members of the legislature, both Democrat and Republican, many of them have told me that they are not going to let the governor's cuts to the Highway Patrol and the Division of Criminal Investigation stand. And as you know, the reason that came up is that there's a shortage of gas tax revenue, and the gas tax revenue has historically been used to fund a portion of the Highway Patrol's budget, and of course the larger share of it has gone to the Department of Transportation, primarily for construction projects. And so it's a huge political football. We try not to engage in the politics of all of that. We supplied the governor with our proposed budget, and unfortunately he waited until after the election and then surprised us with these nearly $8 million in cuts to the Highway Patrol, which, by the way, I think we've talked about this before, that affects 22 troopers who are almost finished with their training or just recently finished their training. We've spent about $100,000 per trooper to get them trained. They have changed their career goals. They have moved. They have been away from their families, basically on the promise that they would have a job. So, but they're very much needed at this point in time, as you know, with the rise in drug crimes and other things that have been going on in our state. We need to have those troopers out there on the road.
Okay, let's get one more caller in before we take our next break. Mark, quickly, what's on your mind?
Okay, hey, Attorney General Fox. My question is, who do you take direction from? You know, the people we elect there in Montana, in Helena, or the governor? Or do you just pick your own direction, you and your staff?
Oh, no. We work collaboratively with people of all parties and political persuasions. We spend a significant amount of time, particularly between the legislative sessions, working with individuals, whether it be in mental health, law enforcement, et cetera.
Thanks, Mark.
Trying to come up with, solutions to the state's problems. So basically, in my mind, I answer to the people of Montana. I was very fortunate and humbled to be reelected with 68% of the vote in November, and I try very hard to do the right things for the right reasons. And I'm looking forward to the next 4 years.
Okay, we're going to take one more quick break and come right back. We have 3 lines open. If you have a question for Attorney General Fox, he'll be with us for about 5 more minutes. And then we have a special guest coming in from Israel for the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. So stay with us. We'll be right back. 721-1290 is the number. Attorney General Tim Fox joining us on the phone. And let's get right to another caller. I believe this is Paul. Good morning, Paul. You're on with Tim Fox.
Good morning, Mr. Hi, Mr. Fox. I sent a question a long time ago about the Political Practices Commissioner trial, and I'm wondering how the Montana Trial Lawyers Association, which could come under the Political Practices Commissioner, how they have stand-in to extend the office.
Yeah, that's a good question. Just a little background real quick, Paul, so the other listeners know what we're talking about. There's a lawsuit that's been filed by a number of groups to try to extend the term of Political Practice Commissioner John Model. And we have intervened in that case, and actually we're at the Montana Supreme Court level right now. We think it's pretty clear that Commissioner Model's term ended on January 1, and so that's the position that we've taken. And I'm not talking out of turn here, but we have publicly taken the position, too, that the plaintiffs in the lawsuit really don't have standing to bring this claim. So you have to stay tuned. The good news is that we were successful in moving it up to the state Supreme Court so that we can get a resolution, hopefully, while the legislature is still in town. Because obviously, if we're right, Mr. Model's term has ended, the governor's going to have to nominate someone to replace him, and the state Senate has to confirm that person. So we want to make sure that's done while the legislature is still here. And we were afraid, really, that the tactic that was being taken by the plaintiffs was to move this out so far in the courts that the governor might get an interim appointment that isn't approved by the Senate that acts until the next legislature.
Oh, this sounds like a whole lot of shenanigans to me.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, thanks for the call.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, we can't really talk too much publicly about it because it's still an active case in court. But I can say the basics of what we've said in our court filings because that's public information.
Well, I can say whatever I want, and I'm calling shenanigans. Speaking of shenanigans, that we've had this decade-long battle with this thing called Real ID. I noticed our country station yesterday was talking about the implications that people might not be able to use their Montana driver's license to access certain planes or courtrooms. And where is this sitting now? Is there any changes after the new administration?
So Senator Daines and Senator Tester have reintroduced their bill to repeal the Real ID Act. And, there are a large number of states, I want to say 17 states, I may be wrong on that number, but a large number of states that are not compliant. And a number of states like Montana have actually passed state laws prohibiting compliance. And I think it's important for the listeners to know, really, the issue here is not so much whether Montana's driver's licenses are safe and secure. They are. They utilize the latest technology features, and they can't be reproduced.
Got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, but the big issue is sharing the personal and private information of Montanans with not only the federal government, but all the other states. And so we're hopeful that the Senator's bill will be passed, and if not, then we'll look at our legal options down the road.
Thanks so much for your time with us, Tim. And just so you know, I think there was an executive order. We're not allowed to say a large number of states. You have to say a huge number of states going forward. So just be careful.
It'll be great. It'll be great.
All right. It'll be great. All right. Thanks so much. Tim Fox, Attorney General. I got a really great sense of humor, too. So he puts up with us, that's for sure. All right. We're going to take a break. We have the Consul General from the Nation of Israel joining us here in the studio in just a moment. Stay with us. All right. Welcome back, everybody. It is a Thursday edition of Talkback. John King is right over there. Good morning, Mr. King.
Good morning, Peter.
Bob Seidenschwartz, the head guy, the grand poobah, if you will, of the Montana World Affairs Council. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you guys. And after that introduction, I got to go.
See you later. We have a very distinguished guest joining us in the studio, but not his first time in our studio. We have the Israeli Consul General, Andy David, with us. It's good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you, Peter. Thank you.
How are you?
Well, I'm busy, but I feel good.
Well, at least you're not so busy you can't come and join us here on Talkback this morning.
It's my pleasure.
We sure appreciate it.
Maybe we could start off by just telling the audience what a Consul General does.
Very simple. My role is to strengthen the relations, the special relations in this case, between Israel and the United States.
Okay, that's easy. And of course, what are you doing here in God's country, if you will, flyover country in Missoula, Montana?
First of all, I came to visit friends. By now, I have a few friends here, and I enjoy coming here. It's beautiful, and people are really nice to me. Yeah. But more than that, I'm here to strengthen the relations, the economic relations, visit the university, meet some officials, elected officials, and just increase the collaboration.
Fantastic.
Now, when you say strengthen the special relationship of the economic relationship between Montana and Israel, I have no idea what that relationship looks like. Like, is it even on the map? Have we defined the relationship?
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's like Israel. We're small on the map. So the relations are about to grow, I hope. And one thing we're working on is a trade delegation. Just for me to meet people and then take the word back to Israel. I think there's a huge potential for collaboration. Yesterday I spoke with the Lieutenant Governor about collaboration in water technologies. I know that Montana has been struck by drought. We've been struck by the same drought perhaps for many years, and we learn how to solve our issues. So we want to share that, and there's a lot to do.
So when you look at the other way around, what things do you think Montana could help Israel with? What exports, what sort of things do you see as...
a few mountains, a few ski hills,
We could use some of your snow, for sure. But I visited Montana, and I saw, for example, that you have a lot of biotechnology companies. You have a lot of companies in the area of photonics. New technologies are needed everywhere, and wherever the innovation comes from, we can use it. So just connect the dots. Or open the doors. That's my role.
I'd like to add a couple of things, too, because there's a really interesting backstory to this. Andy visited Montana several years ago, and we had a conversation, and he said, what do I need to do to start opening up relationships? And I said, Andy, you've got to come back. Montana is a place where people have to see you. They have to meet you. And he has held true to his word. And when he was here last January, he visited companies in Missoula, and he went to Bozeman. And that was for purposes of identifying potential trade partners with Israel to see if those collaborations existed. Right. As a result of that, and then coming back here again, there's going to be a trade mission to Israel, very likely in May, from Montana. So you can see where people-to-people relationships pay off. And he's also going to be speaking today at 4 o'clock over at the Gilkey Building, which is a collaboration between the Blackstone Group and the Montana World Trade Center, and something that we helped to initiate. That's going to be on the Israeli secret sauce. Israel is one of the world's leading countries in terms of innovation and technology creation, especially when it comes to water technology, too.
What is
Fascinating story.
Is the secret sauce hummus?
Well,
what is the...
no, John, but I think we'll let Andy describe what that is. A little bit of a prelude.
It's the olive oil and
Yeah.
tahini that you add to the hummus.
It's organic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But if you would please talk a little bit about what that innovation may be.
Well, then people won't come at 4 o'clock.
We filled the place.
Yeah. Well, the secret sauce, I think, is, first of all, something that I've seen here too. Strong networks. People like to help each other. So that's one. It's that human spirit. Number 2 is never give up. There is no problems that cannot be solved. And if you cannot go through the door, you go through the window. If the window is blocked, then you come through the chimney. This is something that is very unique, I think, or certainly characterizes Montana, but same way in Israel. But then comes a lot of policies, governmental policies that increase the participation of government in sharing the risk of entrepreneurs. I think this is the most important thing to remember, that in many cases people think that government or government money or taxpayers' money should not be used to take risk. It's the private sector's responsibility to take all the risk. In Israel, it's the opposite. We believe that governments can take risk, and when we invest in those startups and we create programs that allow them to prosper, the return is enormous, and we prove that.
Now, of course, it's always great when the risks pays off, right? We have a space program, famous, big risk that we invested in. But we've had other things that government has invested in, whether that be solar energy firms like Solyndra that failed, and then the government's kind of looking bad. So how do you balance that? Both exposing the truth about the failures and the successes of government intervention into the marketplace without making people feel like they're betting on the bad horse.
Well, let's say we create a program where you, as an entrepreneur who is opening a new company, and you have some innovation, will get 50% of your investment shared by the government through all kind of programs. Okay. So, and let's say you do fail. Let's say you do fail. You and 3 of your friends who started up this company.
If we did that, we would likely fail. Yeah.
Okay. But what happens that within a year or 2, all 4 of you will come back, because it's the human spirit that exists in you, and you'll come back better, more experienced. Maybe 4 of you each will start his own company, and then we'll get 4 successful companies. It's the government invests in the tuition of entrepreneurs.
So basically what you're saying is it's not a one-shot deal.
No.
It's a long-term commitment to try to find success, right?
Yeah, and this was a risk that the government started in Israel to take years ago, and by now there is enough data to show that even failures, people come back, they restart, and now they're successful.
Right.
Andy,
We're up against our first break. Go ahead, Bob.
I just wanted to ask, is there, though, a difference in terms of the culture? You're a country of 8 million people, so your human capital becomes your natural resource. So can you see that possibly may be a little different versus a country of 340 million people, where we have a different history and culture as it comes to business and government? So when we come back from the break, we'll let you address that, please.
Okay. Our number, by the way, lines are open. If you want to visit with the Israeli Consul General, Andy David is literally standing right here in our studio, and he's got a real set of real radio headphones to listen to your call and your question. Lines are open at 721-1290, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Back. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Of course, it's the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. And, Bob, you just asked a question of Andy a minute ago.
Yeah, I was asking Andy if, in a country of 8 million people, is there a different culture that exists as what you're describing with entrepreneurship and government collaboration? And then you kind of brought up something off air that you've had representatives from states visit Israel and come back with kind of a different perspective. So can you give us a little insight to that?
Yes, of course. So we're 67. This year we'll celebrate 68 years of independence. And we were not always that entrepreneurial. We started as a socialist country. So that spirit maybe existed in the people, but the policies were not available for people to express their innovation and their creativity. About 2 decades ago, maybe 2.5 decades ago, we changed policies. And it proved that people are people everywhere. Creativity exists everywhere. And if you have the right policies in place, you can flourish. So I don't think it's a matter of size. You see, the United States in general is very much about entrepreneurial spirit. The question is, how do you get it to the next level, to the next stage? And I think we were successful in just by putting the right policies and taking a risk.
Okay, let's get to the phone and say good morning to Al. Al, you're on with Andy David. Go ahead.
Sir, I just had a couple questions I'd like to ask. Over in Israel, if you're talking about us, do you refer to us as the states, like the Brits do, or do you say over in America?
Well, I'm here in Montana, so I refer to you as a state because states can take policies too. And you see some states are more successful than others, and I think the potential exists in every, it can exist on the city level. You see cities taking policies. You see, for example, San Francisco, where I live, where there's some tax breaks if you open a certain company in a certain sector, or if you open your company in a certain area of the city that the city wants to develop. So it can be taken, those steps can be taken in every level.
Over in Israel, do they have the two-party system like we do here?
No, we have a parliamentarian system, and sometimes we envy you that you only have two parties, and sometimes we don't.
Yeah, you have a pretty famously complicated system.
Thanks, Al.
Even as far as parliamentary systems go.
Yeah, our democracy is sometimes impatient. We don't wait 4 years. Governments fall in Israel sometimes more often than we would like to, but they have to build coalitions between many parties, and whoever is successful in building the coalition will be the prime minister. So we're more like the British in this respect.
And it can be quite contentious if you ever watch any of their proceedings there in the Knesset.
Just from a states America perspective, obviously you have a really good perspective on this. Living in America, coming around to the different states, you can tell pretty quickly that things are very different in California than they are in Montana. People are different, attitudes and perspectives are different. But on the whole, when you look at the United States and Israel's relationship over the last 4 years, I would say they've seemed like kind of dicey times, at least through the media lens that we all watch, right? That's all I get to see of Israel is, America's deal with Iran is making these people angry. They're coming over. One of their leaders is talking in our Senate that the president doesn't like it. Oh, no, the president said a state can't be both Jewish and democratic. These are pretty strong words. And then there's a switch. A new president comes in. I mean, how do you perceive the relationship between the Israel government and the American government through this transition?
Okay, now this is the part where you want to get me in trouble. I'll say this. There is so much in common between the United States and Israel, between Americans and Israelis. We believe in the same things. We want the same things. And there's a huge level of collaboration for so many years on so many things: strategic, intelligence, military, economic, cultural. It's really amazing what those two countries have done. Yes, in the last 4 years or more, there have been maybe 2 or 3 moments where we disagreed, and friends sometimes disagree. I also think that maybe the duty that every American and Israeli leaders have, and that is to hug in public, maybe that duty was not done that well. And this is the duty of leaders. They have to show that they're on the same front together.
I will say that President Barack Obama was quite famous for not wanting to be touched by anyone. That he didn't hug. He didn't do a lot of that, really. So,
well, he did other things, and we're thankful to the president, for example, for the foreign military assistance, the New Deal, the new agreement for the next 10 years, and we will always remember that to his favor. But as I said, there were, and as you said, there were some moments where there were very strong disagreements, like the Iran deal.
Okay, wait, we have some callers, so let's get to the phone. And And we've got time before a break for Mike. Mike, you're on with Andy David. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, good morning, Andy. One of the things that I know Israel provides us with that's real important is intelligence information that we can't gather ourselves, and you guys do a whole lot better at a job. And the other thing I'd like you to comment is your fence over there. Apparently, our fence is not going to work, but for some reason, the fence in Israel works. So I'd like to hear your comment on some of that.
All right. Thanks, Mike. So, all right. How about the intelligence side? I know the Mossad is very famous for. You take your security very seriously because you're quite literally surrounded by enemies.
Yeah, we don't have buffers. I mean, you're lucky. You have Mexico and Canada as neighbors, and maybe fish and dolphins as well. Our neighbors are a little bit tougher, and our borders are so close to the centers of population. So we don't have that time. We don't have the leeway that you may have. But I have to say that your intelligence is very good, and we share. It's not just one side giving and the other side receiving. We receive a lot too. So I think sharing is very important. Also analysis, because sometimes you do have the intelligence, it's just the wrong analysis. What does it mean?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think that's also part of the conversations that we have on a regular basis to try and analyze together or share the analysis, and maybe sometimes try to give advice, although sometimes you don't listen, but that's a different story.
Now when it comes to security, as Mike mentioned, I realize that we laugh a little bit about, we're going to build the wall. You folks have a wall, but you also, it isn't just a wall, it's also a wall that is manned 24/7, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are all kind of means. Some of it is personnel, some of them are technological. But I wanted to touch maybe a more relevant one, and that is in the south of Israel, in the border between Israel and Egypt. We've had an open border, basically, over there because of the peace agreement with Egypt. So it was quiet for so many years, but we started to have a problem where, a country should have the right, I think, to determine who enters and who doesn't. And, of course, we had a problem of many illegal migrants coming in. So we wanted to have a better control over that and decide who enters and who doesn't. And it's not just because of people who need to come or like refugees. So this is a totally different story, but we're talking about criminal elements, smuggling, human trafficking, for example. So we had a huge problem with human trafficking in the 90s and early 2000s, and we understood that we didn't have that problem before, so it took us years to figure out what to do, and there are many, many means that you have to take. One of them is a physical barrier.
Andy, were these people coming from what region primarily?
Yeah, they were coming from Africa.
North Africa?
Yeah, because Israel is, if you want to walk somewhere, you cannot walk to Europe, you have to take a boat. But Israel is the only place where you can actually walk and reach an open society, free society with economic opportunities. So this is why they walked to Israel.
Okay, we're going to come right back. Marilyn is waiting on the phone to visit with you, and we do have three other lines open, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. Talkback continues in a moment. This is Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And we have the Israeli Consul General joining us here in the studio. We're privileged to have Andy David joining us. Let's get back to the phones and say good morning to Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn. You're on with Andy David. Go ahead.
Good morning. Has the BDS boycott movement in Europe and on some of America's college campuses been at all successful?
Can you tell us what BDS means real quick?
Yeah, BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanction. It's an attempt to basically isolate Israel and describe Israel as the worst violator of all values that exist. Basically, it's a hate movement that tries to hurt Israel. If you look at the activists, the leaders of that movement, it's not an organization. It's a movement of individuals or many organizations which had anti-Israel activity before the name came up, and somebody came with this nice marketing name, BDS, and now it's catching. So did it have success? So the economic success is not so much. I mean, and the movement is not about the dollars and the cents. It's about trying to put Israel in the court of world opinion and try to say Israel is doing this and Israel is doing that and Israel is bad and this is why we have to boycott it.
Just so we're clear, when they say this and that, like the focus seems to me when I read about BDS is the issue of settlements and contested territory. And the argument is that if the settlements are allowed to go forward, that it would cut off the future of a two-state solution.
Well, the activists of the BDS movement are not just about the settlements. It's about the existence of Israel. And you hear them talk about the one-state solution instead of the two-state solution. If it was about settlements, okay, the two-state solution is supposed to resolve it. But they're talking about the one-state solution, meaning the end of the state of Israel.
So with the BDS, just to help people understand, that's on products that are made in settlement areas. So many times the actual producers or workers are people living, such as the Palestinians, working for, in many cases, Israeli-owned businesses. So there's an economic impact. And has not the EU passed some laws on certain products? They're saying if made in settlements, cannot come into the EU.
Well, that is a slightly different issue, Bob. The BDS basically is targeting, in the United States, for example, they're targeting American companies. For example, they're targeting HP or Motorola or Caterpillar for selling products to Israel that might be used by Israeli military. So it's boycotting American companies.
As well as Israeli companies producing goods and services.
That's more in Europe.
In Europe,
I would say.
Yeah, Marilyn, anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks for the call. All right, so let's get, this is Mark. Mark, you're on with Andy David. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Andy. I got two compliments for you. And one, I'll start with the military since I'm retired military. And we learned from the Israeli army and military forces that women can help be in the military. So you guys started the ball rolling, and U.S. has picked it up.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, I feel from watching the news and reading papers that the European Union since about 2004, 2005, has been drifting away from the U.S. as an ally, but you guys in Israel are still our greatest ally.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So,
real quick question. One of the things that's been bandied about after the inauguration of Donald Trump is this idea of moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which I always thought it was in Jerusalem, frankly. So
Tel Aviv.
What's the deal there, and why is there any controversy around this?
So here's an absurd thing. We are so close, and we agree on so many things, but traditionally the United States and Israel did not agree on three major issues. We do not agree on our borders. We do not agree on where our capital is. Right?
The U.S. won't agree that you have the ability to make your own capital where you want it.
Well, the policy is that the embassy is not in our capital, Jerusalem, but it's in Tel Aviv.
Okay.
So let me ask you this. Forgive me for interrupting.
Right.
So, from the perspective of Israel, your capital is Jerusalem.
Of course.
Okay. So
it's always been there.
What is in Tel Aviv?
Tel Aviv is a nice, beautiful beach city
with an American embassy.
It's like Washington and New York.
Okay.
Okay. So is the capital of the United States New York? No, there's a lot of things happening there. It's a cultural center and a business center.
It used to be long ago,
but it's not.
Right. Yeah.
So Andy, for clarification, the conflict arises with the Islamic world, and who claims Jerusalem as its sacred city? And historically, you've got a pretty important part of the Islamic history and culture as far as the prophet with Jerusalem, and then historically with Israel. So is not the issue of who has authority, access, and there's also an economic issue there too.
Right. So we can go into the theological and historical perspective, and maybe I would just give one example. Okay, when Muslims on Temple Mountain or Al-Aqsa, the mosque there, when they pray, they face towards Mecca in Saudi Arabia. So actually, the most sacred place where they claim Muhammad rode a horse into the sky, into the heavens one night, it's that big rock over there. Basically, their behinds are towards that sacred place. When Jews pray, doesn't matter where in the world, we face towards Jerusalem, towards Temple Mount. So this is the historical perspective and theological perspective. Now let's talk about real politics, right? So we said that we are willing to compromise on sovereignty in Jerusalem, and actual offers were made by our Prime Minister Barak in 2000, by our Prime Minister Olmert in 2007, but they were rejected, and we never heard back. Now, we say that there are areas in Jerusalem that maybe are under dispute. East Jerusalem, for example. But West Jerusalem, there is no dispute over West Jerusalem. At least that's what we believe, and certainly what the Americans and others are telling us. When they talk about the 67 borders, West Jerusalem is under no doubt. So the question is, why can't the United States move the embassy to West Jerusalem? Right?
And we're going to come right back after this timeout. We have all four lines open. Andy David, the Israeli consul. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was going to say, we still didn't hear the third disagreement. I wanted to get the big third one. So.
Well, we'll get the third one after this quick timeout. It's a little tease for you. We'll be right back. This is Talk Back, and we are back. 721-1290 is the number, 1-800-568-5309. A very rare opportunity to visit face-to-face, if you will, with the Israeli Consul General Andy David, who is visiting here in Missoula. Bob Seidenschwartz, of course, here with the Montana World Affairs Council. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian, and you wanted to get through the third thing there.
I do, but I'm actually stepping back a little because I was taken aback a little bit by we had the three big disagreements. So far you've mentioned borders and the capital. But when you go and look at a map of Israel, some of the lines around the country are dotted. And this just now occurred to me. I always think of it as a concrete block on my globe at home, right? But there's a lot of questions about where the borders actually lie, and America, and I guess the rest of the world, has not reached an agreement. So tell us a little bit about this struggle, and where does Israel think that the border should lie, and why?
Okay, little history lesson. Israel was established in 1948, and by a United Nations resolution, the partition plan. The partition plan talk about partitioning the land into two areas, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. The Jews, Israel, accepted. The Arabs rejected, and the next day they invaded that little tiny piece of land where Jews left. About 3% of our population was killed in that war. So it was a long and hard war, and in 1949 the hostilities stopped, and we stopped them at an armistice line. So this is where the battle stopped. It's not an internationally recognized border. It is an armistice line. It's a temporary line.
And it's larger than the original territory that was granted to Israel in 48.
Luckily, we won that war. Now,
so is that line defined then, forgive the term, by conquest or simply by defense?
By conquest.
Okay.
Conquest and defense. You had to push the forces.
Sure. Right.
And then this line existed for 19 years. Now, who controlled the West Bank at that time? It was Jordan. Okay? People who were living there were studying from Jordanian textbooks. They were carrying a Jordanian passport. They were using the Jordanian currency, the dinar. It was all Jordan. It was the Jordanian legions who were present in that territory, including East Jerusalem. By the way, East Jerusalem, or part of Jerusalem, including the Jewish quarter, was conquered by Jordan.
And you could not go into the
you would be
area historically that you were able to pray at because of the Jordanian occupation.
Yeah. So for 19 years, Jews could not visit the most holy place for Judaism, which is the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. In 1967, another war broke out, another attack, and luckily we won that war again. And this time we pushed the enemy, if you want, even further. And at the end of that 6 days, the United Nations Security Council came out with the resolution called the very famous 242. what does Resolution 242 says? It says that, okay, there were hostilities, and now in order to move to peace and security, there will be an exchange. Peace and security in exchange for territories. Now, they didn't say the territories. Why? Because they understood that these armistice lines included, those borders are non-defensible. So there need to be some exchange, some amendments to that line that will be agreed between the two sides. By the way, back in 2004, President Bush, in a letter to Prime Minister Sharon at that time, acknowledged the fact that in any future agreement, there will be a need to some adjustments. Now, the offers that we put on the table in the last 20 years, if you want, included some amendments to those borders, but with exchange of territory. So in an area where we will maybe hold that part or that territory, that will be exchanged for another region where the Palestinians, in this case, will get the compensation. So 3% here, you'll get 3% somewhere else. We try to give a fair offer. People can read Dennis Ross's book about the year 2000 negotiations at Camp David, and he actually has some maps in that book that describe the offers. The result was that we never heard back from the Palestinian, Yasser Arafat. So an offer was put on the table. He said, okay, they'll think about it. They never came back to the negotiation table and started the Intifada, this huge terrorist war against us. In 2007, again, Prime Minister Olmert gave even a more generous offer. Mahmoud Abbas, the current president, said, okay, we'll get back to you, and they never came back. We never heard a counter offer.
Well, let me ask you this. So for a country to recognize Israel, it's solely up to that country's will, basically, right? So tomorrow, if President Trump wanted to, he could say, we recognize the current borders of Israel as the prior armistice line, and that would be it, right?
True, but we were talking about world politics. That's complicated.
Well, we do.
You have one Israel, and you have over 50 Muslim countries. You have 22 Arab countries. Numbers count.
He apparently made a call to a second China. I imagine he could do the same in Israel.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're up against another break. 721-1290. This is so fascinating. I've been doing this job for 42 years, and I've never heard that story. So it's amazing. We're going to come right back. All four lines are open. Andy David joining us until 10 o'clock this morning. Take advantage of it. Okay, we are back on Talkback 721-1290, and we're solving all the problems of the world right here in this room.
Or at least learning about the problems in Israel. So we went over two big disagreements between the United States and Israel. One was on borders, which got a big education on that one. One was on recognition of the capital city, which is headlines now with Sean Spicer, the Trump spokesperson, said that they are in early stages of considering it. But they haven't made any moves on that yet. And then what is the third one? You said there were three.
Yeah.
So
well, the third one is connected to the first two, and this is where our sovereignty is, meaning it's connected to the borders. Recognizing which part of the land is under Israeli sovereignty.
Oh, okay. So what?
So it's a question of sovereignty over some areas.
Now, when we talk about the Palestinian and where they have sovereignty, is that what the difference is? Where is sovereignty for the Palestinians? Where is sovereignty for Israel?
Yeah, basically we were talking about the interface or the area where will it be Palestinian or will it be Israeli?
Gotcha.
So it obviously can't be both, right? It has to be one or the other.
Well, in the past, I remember a story by our famous president, Shimon Peres, who unfortunately passed away this year. And he said that back in the 80s, he visited with Marshal Tito. He was the leader of Yugoslavia. And Marshal Tito asked him, why don't you create one big state? Look, we did it. It works for us, right? So I think that history teaches us that sometimes if you want to be good neighbors with somebody, you have to separate. And in this case, everybody believes that Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah, and how'd that work out for Yugoslavia, too?
Yeah, how did it work for Yugoslavia, right?
And as they say in this country, good fences make good neighbors, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we are trying our best to be good neighbors.
Unless your fence is on my part of my property, Peter, then I'm going to make you move the fence.
All right,
Exactly. That's the argument.
Yeah.
All right. Marilyn is back for a quick question. Marilyn, quickly, go ahead.
Thank you. So I remember back when President Clinton was in, there was a two-state solution agreed upon, but Arafat refused. So isn't the truth is because they don't want Israel to even exist? In fact, we've heard that they have created maps in the Middle East that don't include Israel. So isn't that the case?
Thanks, Marilyn.
Well, there are many who agree with you, Marilyn. The big question is, in my eyes, right? In my eyes, the big question is this whole story, is it about 67, meaning Israel's expansion, or is it about 48, meaning Israel's creation? Now, if you look at what you said, textbooks, maps, official maps of the Palestinian Authority, Israel does not exist on that map. If you look at the plaque at the entrance of Palestinian embassies around the world, you'll see a little map, and Israel does not exist on that map. So if you look at textbooks and if you look at maps, official maps that you can find in Israel, you will see the Palestinian Authority on them. We recognize that they have the right to self-determination, but we are also insisting that that would not be on the expense of our security. So creating another Arab entity next to Israel that will be unstable and will attack us, we don't need another Syria next to our borders.
Okay, we're up against a 1-minute timeout. This is our final break. So we have Aaron and Patty that both want to visit with you, Andy, and a couple more lines open. So
yeah, and he just said something outrageous, that there's something wrong with Syria. I mean, I'm sure people are going to be calling in upset about that. 721-1290.
We will be right back. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. 8 precious minutes to go. Go ahead, John.
Phone number.
Yeah, we got to get the phone. Aaron is up first. Aaron, you are on with Andy David. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, and I really appreciate the program today. I had a couple of questions. First of all, I don't know that you answered the question. I don't remember the caller's name, but he had a kind of an inconsequential question, but I thought it was a curious question, and that is, the people in Israel, what do they call us, the states? Do they call us the states, like some places, like some foreign countries do, or do they call us America?
Oh, we use both terms. Yeah, we call you the United States. In Hebrew, I mean, the translation of the name of your country in Hebrew is the United States. But like many other countries in the world or people in the world, it's easier to call you Americans.
Okay. And I guess on a more serious note, what is, you mentioned that the government investing in private enterprise and in entrepreneurs, then I imagine with an investment there would be a payback. Are these loans, or do you actually own part of the company, or how does that work?
That's an excellent question. Well, we don't take equity. We share the risk, but we don't share the profit. The idea is the government is not looking to make money. It's looking to make innovation and creativity and to help the business sector and create jobs.
One presumes taxes if the business is successful.
Well, like any other business,
right.
but we're not taking equity.
Right.
One presumes taxes.
All right. So let's get Patty on the line. Patty, you are on with Andy David. Go ahead.
Hi, Andy. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's something for the New America, and it was a map that our country drew up years and years ago, where they wanted to take over Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria.
Wait, the United States wanted to take over and claim these places as United States?
Yeah, for the oil companies,
well,
of course.
What backwater website did you get that off?
Where did you originally hear that, Patty?
Oh, geez, I'm full of so much information that it's hard for me to
Well,
Something for the new America. I remember that.
Well, it doesn't sound...
we are doing that. We went into Iraq illegally. We went into Afghanistan illegally. We're in Syria illegally. I told you I met a woman, Dennis, from Syria, and talked to her for 2 hours. She said, we don't have any problems. Somebody went in and instigated the new spring. And
Patty, do you have a question? Do you have a question for Andy?
Yeah, I just wondered if he was aware of that map, because, I don't think Israel would be any different.
Okay, we'll let him answer that.
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of an intention for the United States to take over those places. I've never heard of such a thing.
I don't think we want the trouble. Thank you very much.
Look how well we've done so far.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get...
we won't even accept Puerto Rico as a state. Right. I doubt Iraq's close on the list.
Let's get Bob on the line. Bob, you're on with Andy David. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi, Mr. David. Say, I have a question for you. My son is an entrepreneur that has developed some stuff for cancer, just starting out, and it sounds really interesting. He's wanting to jump into an international market if he could. And who do we contact, or who do we talk to about maybe seeing if his product would be something you might be interested in?
Okay, so Bob, you were nodding your head on that, right?
I just want to refer that to Andy, please.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, for your question. So there are a few programs that exist, actually, where your son may find some interest. There's a program called the Bird Foundation, where American companies and Israeli companies who want to collaborate, and there's an R&D component. I guess that if your son develops a product, there's research and development into that. So if you will collaborate with an Israeli program or company, both companies, the American and the Israeli, will receive government money. The American from the U.S. government, the Israeli from the Israeli government. So for every dollar your son invests in his research and development, by collaborating with an Israeli company, not only will he get another dollar from the Israeli company, but he will get $2 more from our government.
So, real quick question. When you're talking about investing in entrepreneurs, what sorts of endeavors are considered? Are they just new R&D endeavors? Or let's say Peter and I want to start a live talk show in Israel and have a Palestinian host, an Israeli host, and we'll chat about things. Maybe we'll even get that guy from Yugoslavia to give his opinion.
Tito's dead.
Yeah. Well, we could speak from the grave, whatever. We'll have a channeler. If we wanted to start up an enterprise like that, obviously it would make money. Would that be allowed? Would the government fund that sort of thing?
Well, there are two criteria that you have to meet. Number one is the level of innovation. It has to be something really new.
Well, no one else is doing that in Israel.
Well, no. You have to come and listen to our radio talk shows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And bring them on.
Yeah, and the second thing is the size of the market. So if the government will invest in some innovation, it has to really be innovation. Something that is new, that is creating something new, but with a large market potential.
Gotcha.
Okay. So when you had, I forget, when you said the bird, is that BYRD? Bird?
BI.
BIRD.
Yeah, it stands for the Binational Industrial R&D.
Okay. So for you, I believe it was Bob. It's
BIRD.
BIRD Foundation. Okay.
Yeah. And we have a representative of the Bird Foundation in our in San Francisco. Actually, I brought her here to Montana last January, and we visited a lot of companies, and there were some interest in collaborating. And so, as coming back to the first topic that we spoke about, there are concrete things that we're doing, and we hosted a few Montana companies in San Francisco when we brought delegations of Israeli companies over there to Silicon Valley. We had a breakfast, a Montana World Trade Center held a breakfast in San Francisco, which I attended. Members of that delegation came to some of the other events that we held. So we open doors. It's up to the entrepreneurs to walk through those doors.
And we have exactly 1 minute left in the program, and I wouldn't give Kevin, our caller, enough time to get his question out. But just real quickly, both of you, Andy and Bob, what's next with the relationship between the World Affairs Council and Mr. David and the...
I will speak very quickly. We will continue to move forward this collaboration that was started several years ago, which I'm very happy to be a part of. And Andy has held up his end of the deal. So Montana companies will continue to be visited. A trade delegation goes to Israel. People start collaborating. It starts opening up doors and opportunities. this is meant to put Montana and Israel together on the map.
Right. And it's always a pleasure to see you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for coming to Missoula. We appreciate it. And John, tomorrow I'll be gone.
That's right. So, but Bob and I will be here, as well as we'll be speaking with the county attorney and others, who, especially you. We'll have live open phones as well.
Right, indeed. So thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to drive safely out there. We have some nasty-looking air sitting down on the valley floor. It's called an inversion. Try not to breathe too deep. Yeah. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. And don't forget Montana Morning tomorrow at 6 a.m. with the fabulous John King. So I have to use up my unused vacation time.